Chapter 6, Adolescence-Cognitive Development. So in this section, we will discuss an overview of cognitive development, cognitive milestones in adolescence, Piaget's theory and the formal operation stage, and other areas of cognitive development during adolescence. So let's begin with the overview of cognitive development. So cognitive development is the processes such as perceptive thinking, reasoning, and problem solving by which one comes to know and understand the world. So let's look at some of the milestones for adolescence. So during this time, there's a lot of things that are happening across the cognitive domain. So in early childhood, concrete thought dominates the here and the now. They still need concrete representation of what they're doing. They need to be able to see it. Cause and effect relationships are underdeveloped, and there's a stronger self than social awareness. So they're still a little egocentric at the beginning of early adolescence. Now, when they get to middle adolescence, ages 15 to 17, they have a growth in abstract thought. They revert to concrete thought under stress. So when they need to, they go back to what they can see, manipulating whatever it is that they need to do. Now, cause and effect relationships are better understood, and they're very self-absorbed. So they're still egocentric, but they're starting to move towards thinking about their friends and others. Now, in late adolescence, abstract thought is established, they're future-oriented, and they're able to understand, plan, and pursue long-term goals, and they are philosophical and idealistic at this age. So let's look at Piaget's cognitive development theory. So Piaget's theory states and explains how people think and understand. So Piaget says that we have schemas, these knowledge bases, in which what we know about the world. And we assimilate these schemas by adding information to what we know and making it stronger, or accommodating and changing what we thought we knew with new information, and this causes equilibration. Piaget also says that there are 4 stages of cognitive development. And at this age, in adolescence, they're in what is known as formal operations, even though they go back and use some of their foundations from concrete at this age. So formal operational means that they can think abstractly, hypothetical, and they are concerned with ethics, politics, social, and moral issues. So formal operational thought is characterized as less rigid, more flexible, and less dependent on perceptions and past experiences. So what this means is that they can think abstractly about things that they may or may not see. So they're increasingly able to use logic and reasoning, abstract thought, and flexibility. And some characteristics of this thought are things like hypothetical deductive reasoning, scientific inductive reasoning, game of thinking, egocentric thought in regard to an imaginary audience, personal and invincible fable, and apparent hypocrisy. So let's look at hypothetical deductive reasoning. So hypothetical reasoning, this is when they have the ability to think and reason about ideas in the abstract. They can think about hypothetical situations. Now, deductive reasoning, this begins with the big picture and developing conclusions. So an example of this would be going from a general truth to a specific deduction. So water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and the water is frozen. So based off of that, it must be 32 degrees or colder, because that's the freezing point of water. Now, deductions are from true general premises and are always correct. So it's based off of what they can see. Now, hypothetical deductive reasoning allows a person to work through problems abstractly and to start with a false premise, yet reason a logical conclusion. So they can argue that the water must be frozen because it's 32 degrees, even when somebody tells them that the water isn't. So scientific inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is reasoning from specific facts to general conclusions. So this would be from specific instances to general. And an example would be my dog's water dish is frozen. So my neighbor's dog's water dish must be frozen too. Well, this isn't necessarily true. Your dog's water dish could have been in the shadows, making it colder. But your neighbor's water dish may be in the sun. Therefore, you can't make that claim that that water dish is frozen too. So inductions from observed specifics are probable, but not necessarily correct. Now, scientific inductive reasoning, it starts with an observation, such as the water dish, or a thought to generate a hypothesis. So, I'm thinking that my dog's water dish must be frozen too, and then you could go test it by going and seeing. But you can't make a grand claim that it is. Game of thinking is where you divorce oneself from reality and playfully consider various hypothetical possibilities in certain situations. So, this would be where a person suspends their beliefs and assumes a position that may be opposed to what they actually believe. And this comes a lot when peers are, and especially adolescents, are arguing and debating. Because in a debate, you are sometimes given a stance. And even if you don't believe that stance, you have to back it up with evidence. And then also with that, you have to construct and support it using that evidence, and then using the evidence from the other side to continue to support your stance. And this improves a lot of metacognitive skills through the process because you got to plan and evaluate and think about what are they going to say about my argument and what can I use for their argument to continue the debate. Adolescent egocentrism. Now, pseudo-stupidity is the tendency to interpret situations in more complex ways than called for. So during adolescence, they feel as if parents and adults don't understand because they are experiencing a lot of these emotions and things for the first time. So adolescents have a tendency of overreacting to situations because of this and their brain development. And this is what is known as pseudo-stupidity because they are making it more complex than it actually is. An imaginary audience is also part of egocentrism. And this is where adolescents believe that people are obsessed and consumed with their appearance and their behaviors. They feel like everybody is watching and analyzing everything that they do, so that they have to be perfect and on par all the time. So they hold unrealistic self-expectations for perfection, and they recognize that other people have their own ideas about who they are. Now, personal or invincibility fables are beliefs that one is immune from all harm or injury. Now, during adolescence, they don't necessarily think about the risks that they're taking. So they believe that texting and driving, well, they're not going to get it in a wreck. It's not going to happen to them. So they believe negative consequences are not going to happen. And until it does, that fable is still there for them. Now, apparent hypocrisy is the considerable incongruence between what they say they believe and how they behave. So it's when they say one thing but do another. And oftentimes they feel that they are very unique in their feelings and their beliefs, but they may not know how to display that in their actions. So let's pause and process what we have covered so far and answer these 7 questions. So let's look at some other areas of cognitive development. So there's a lot of changes in cognitive processes during adolescence in regard to their dialectical reasoning, their problem solving, and their moral reasoning. And this is all primarily because of their prefrontal cortex developing and them being able to perform executive functioning such as controlling their behavior, making decisions, and holding attention. So dialectical reasoning. This is the deliberate coordination or inferences for the purpose of making progress. Now, one's assumptions to assist when it's what they use when they're trying to reason through a problem. It's their problem solving ability. So it's where they look at opposing facts and they're weighing and comparing it to determine what is my best solution? How should I go about doing this? So you can kind of think about dialectical reasoning as making a giant pros and cons list and then picking the most reasonable conclusion based upon the evidence and the logic of their list. So problem solving is the development of strategies to overcome an obstacle in order to achieve a goal. And this is done through task analysis and encoding. So task analysis is the careful examination of a problem and considering what steps they need to do. So it's their plan of action. And then encoding is where they develop an internal mental representation of the situation. So they've evaluated everything, now they got their action plan, and they have this mental idea of this is what's going to happen. Moral reasoning is another thing that comes up in adolescence. And Kohlberg focuses his work on the idea of morality development. Now, morality is the beliefs about what behavior is considered right and what's wrong, and the conformity to rules and principles in society. Now, Kohlberg says that there are 3 levels and 6 stages of moral reasoning: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And that these moral decisions may be derived from conflicts or dilemmas in which consequences of each choice must be weighed and considered. So it goes back to that dialectical reasoning of the pros and cons of each and then picking the best choice. And this is where his stages and his levels come from. So looking at his stages, level 1 is pre-conventional. And stage 1 is punishment and obedience, and stage 2 is instrumental purpose and exchange. Now, during this time, who decides what is moral? Well, this is primarily younger children are in level 1. So adults and authority figures determine what is moral, and what is not moral is punished. And it's determined, so people in stage 2, they determine what is moral based on their needs. So it's more of a getting what they need. So it's individualistic, and it can take others' perspectives but not coordinate it together. So in stage 1, moral behaviors are rewarded and non-moral behaviors are punished. Whereas in stage 2, moral behaviors are what will lead me to what I want. So in stage 1, if they act morally, they'll receive a reward, and if not, they'll be punished. Whereas in stage 2, if they act morally by helping someone else, they might get something for it. So it's a reward exchange. Now in level 2, conventional, there's stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 3 is about mutual interpersonal expectations and relationships and conformity. So in this stage, social roles determine moral behavior. So here they can coordinate with the group. And how do they know what's moral? Moral behaviors are what a good person in my society would do. So it's kind of that good girl, bad girl type thing. So I do this because I'm a good person and not a bad person. So why do they act moral? Well, I need to be a good person and live up to what others expect of me. I want them to think I am good, not bad. Now, stage 4 is social systems and conscience maintenance. Now, this is where there's societal laws that determine what is moral, and I determine what is moral based on the laws. So why do I act moral? Because it's the law. And I need to follow the law so society does not break down, and so I'm doing what is expected. Now, some people do not ever move out of the conventional stage. Post-conventional, level 3, goes a little bit deeper in regard to outside of general moral thinking. So it's very abstract to a point. So stage 5 considers many people's perspectives, and an objective outsider. So, laws are social contracts that should be changed when necessary to reflect human rights. So, sometimes rules are made to be broken, is what stage 5 is really focused at. So, morals are what is right for all people, but this may not be the same as the laws. So, morals and laws in stage 5 look a little bit different to these people. And sometimes it's necessary to challenge the laws to promote justice, because what's morally right and what's currently in the laws may not match up. So if we kind of think about our Constitution and how the Bill of Rights and how we have amendments and how we have these changes, a lot of people who brought forth those amendments were thinking in this post-conventional level. So they were thinking, well, this is the rule and this is what it says, but women deserve the right to vote and men deserve the right to vote because it's morally right. Um, so they really think about these different aspects that may not necessarily be in the law. Now, stage 6, this is where the individual person defines what is right and wrong based on their own self-ethical principles. So morals are abstract principles of universal justice and transcend all the social contracts and all the laws. So all human beings, no matter, deserve equal rights and should be treated with respect and justice. That is where they really look at what is considered morally right and then changing it based on what is people that are being oppressed for certain reasons or people that are being mistreated. So we again are going to pause and process what we have covered so far. And that's the end of this section.